Universal blood donor and universal blood recipient are respectively. So we just cut down the diagram here to note that the left side is your donor side, your right side is your recipient side. So let's review the different types of blood and also the RH factor. So let's begin with the RH factor, and then we will look at all different types of blood. So RH is positive or negative blood type, but really we could just say positive or not positive, because there's a difference based on if it has that positive RH, and if it has a negative, it kind of doesn't mean anything extra. So let's just say we have two blood cells here. So if one of them is positive and one of them is not, so let's say this one is a positive RH factor, which is a type of antigen that is on the blood, that means that this type of blood is completely positive, and therefore, because this is a positive cell, there's no antibodies against anything else. No antibodies, because the only other option here would be a negative, which a negative is kind of the same thing as just saying it doesn't have this positive trait to it. So it's just nothing extra, no extra, it's just there. But the positive has that positive factor onto it. It's like an extra characteristic to the blood. So meaning that this person who has the positive RH factor can receive blood that either is also positive, so can receive also positive, or negative, because there's no antibodies to fend off against anything extra. If there is a type of blood that is negative, meaning that it's negative or just kind of nothing is there, it has no extra trait, it doesn't have this positive trait, but because it doesn't have this positive trait, what it does have is antibodies against the positive. So cannot get positive. So there's antibodies here that fend off anything that's positive, and because it doesn't have that positive trait. So it does have antibodies, meaning that then this negative cannot receive any positive blood. However, the negative could be given to someone else, because as we see here, this positive was able to receive positive or negative blood types. So we know that our universal donor has to be something with a negative in it. So either option A, where there's a negative here, or option D, we see there's a negative there. Now let's go into the A and B blood types. There's A, there's B, there's AB, and then there's O, meaning it just doesn't have any of those. So if we see an O, it's kind of like a plain bagel. There's nothing there that makes it any distinguished. We have blood type A, which means that it has that A characteristic. So think of it as like A is like a type of A seed on a bagel. We'll say there's A flavoring that we're putting on this bagel. Now we're moving to B. This has B seed that we're putting on this bagel. So think of it kind of like A is sesame seeds and B is poppy seeds. And then we have another type, which is like your everything bagel, which has both A and B. Now, if we think about these seeds, think of them kind of like rival companies at the bagel shop. We don't want any intermixing of these types of seeds, right? Because if you ask for your sesame seed bagel, you just want your sesame seed bagel. If you ask for poppy, that's what you want. You don't want any other types of seeds. But if you want an everything bagel, then you want all of those seeds on your bagel. So let's go to your O-type blood. This is your O. So if you want your O-type blood or your plain bagel, that means that you're saying, I do not want any A's, any sesame seeds, or any B's on my bagel. So you have antibodies against the A and the B, because we cannot mix that into this. If we have our A-type blood, that means that we have our antibodies against B. You do not want any poppy seeds on your sesame seed bagel. However, if you have type O, let's say, which is completely plain, your plain bagel, can I put this plain bagel in the same bag as your sesame seed bagel? Okay, it doesn't matter to me if a plain bagel touches my sesame seed bagel. There's nothing that could possibly contaminate it because there's no seeds on it to contaminate it with. So think of it that way when you think of your O-type blood versus your A or your B. Now let's move on to type B blood. If you have your B blood, you have your antibodies against your A seeds. right? Because if, let's say, you have your poppy seed bagel here, you don't want your sesame seed bagel touching it. It's going to get all contaminated. But a plain bagel, could that touch your poppy seed bagel? Sure, that's not going to contaminate it with anything. Then moving on to type AB blood. That's like your everything bagel. Okay, so you have your A and your B seeds on it. So if you have your everything bagel, if I put my sesame seed bagel onto it, will that contaminate it? No, because it already has sesame seeds. If I put my poppy seed bagel on it, will that contaminate it? No, it already has poppy seeds too. So there are no antibodies against AB because nothing to contaminate it with. It already has both types. So if we're thinking in terms of the universal donor, we know that the universal donor what's the bagel that could touch all of these other bagels and not contaminate any of them? That is your O-type blood. So we know that our universal donor will have to be O-type blood, which we see is either option A or option C. However, we already decided that your universal donor has to be Rh factor negative, nothing extra that contaminates it with, either positive or not positive. So therefore, the universal donor would have to be your O negative. But let's just make sure when we look at the recipient side that we agree that it should be AB positive. That goes with this choice of O negative. So why would it be AB positive as the universal recipient? So if we go back to our bagel analogy, which was the only bagel that could be touched by any bagel and not get any contamination? That would be AB. So AB is your universal recipient because we could touch anything onto it and there is no contamination. And then if we have specifically AB positive, the AB positive, remember here, it was able to receive both positive and negative, and it didn't contaminate it because it has that extra trait of that positive. So it's like the extra, you put some extra cinnamon, let's say, on your bagel. You just really like having cinnamon on your bagel. So you could get cinnamon or not cinnamon touching it. That's like an extra seasoning here as your Rh factor. So that could be your universal recipient. So therefore, option A, O negative as the donor, AB positive as the recipient, would be your answer here for the universal donor and the universal recipient.